Good evening, my friends. I hope this message finds you somewhere quiet, maybe the end of a long day, the glow of a lamp, a cup of coffee cooling beside you, because what I'm about to share will disturb that calm. Tonight, we journey to a place where silence itself has changed shape. The night no longer belongs to fear, but to the sound of something new, the low, steady whisper of drones above the plains of northern Burkina Faso. It was in the early days of October 2025 when that whisper began to rewrite everything. There were no explosions at first, no screams, only the mechanical rhythm of precision. A sound that means one thing: a nation once hunted has learned to hunt. For decades, Burkina Faso, a landlocked country at the heart of West Africa, lived in the shadow of invisible wars. Militants drifted through the dark like ghosts, torching villages, stealing children, and vanishing before dawn. Jibo, Arbinda, Yamba. Names that once whispered of sorrow became open wounds on the map. But in 2025, that changed. The hunted became the hunters. Under the unflinching eye of a young captain named Ibrahim Traoré, Burkina Faso stopped running. Drones rose into the night. Villagers volunteered. Soldiers moved with new purpose, and the hum that once carried terror now carried something else: defiance. The world didn't notice at first. No headlines, no breaking news. But in the Sahel, the ground itself seemed to tremble not from fear, but from awakening. It began near Jibo. Field intelligence reported a convoy of militants moving fast, too fast for routine patrols. In the past, such warnings were prayers whispered into static. But not this time. A drone locked on. A commander approved the strike. Minutes later, silence returned. Not the silence of defeat, but of justice delivered from the sky. That was only the beginning. Between October and November, Burkina Faso's military launched a series of operations that stunned even its allies in Mali and Niger. The world called it luck. It was not. It was evolution. Drones didn't fly alone. They moved in harmony with men on the ground. Communications flowed in real time. Local volunteers, known as VDPs, became the eyes and ears of the army. On October 8th, north of Borzanga, a militant cell specializing in drone attacks was wiped out before sunset. A week later, a hidden weapons depot near Jibo was destroyed, clean, silent, surgical. And then came the night of October 25th, a night soldiers now call the Awakening. Thermal sensors spotted heat signatures deep in a valley near Yamba. Fighters were sleeping, unaware their hour had come. 2 TB, 2 drones adjusted course. Missiles cut through the cold Sahel air. The valley lit up like dawn. When morning came, there was no movement, no shouting, only the quiet hum of engines fading into sky. That night marked a turning point. For years, the world saw Burkina Faso as helpless. But after Yamba, no one could deny it. The country once begging for aid was now rewriting the rules of war. And the West fell silent, not from ignorance this time, but from discomfort. A small African army was achieving what global powers had failed to do for decades, defeating terror through discipline, intelligence, and belief. But every victory has a shadow. War, even righteous war, carries weight. Each strike risks the lives of civilians, the moral burden that no soldier forgets. Still, ask the people of Jibo what they think. Ask the mothers who once buried children in silence. They will tell you, better to fight standing than die kneeling. By November 2025, hundreds of militants were gone. Supply roads reopened. Convoys carrying grain and medicine rolled north again. For the first time in years, children walked to partially reopened schools under the watchful eyes of soldiers who had once been strangers in their own land. Something far greater than military success was stirring. The heart of the nation had begun to beat again. As the front lines pushed outward, another front opened, not of bullets, but of belief. It began with a simple phrase: the Patriotic Support Fund. Taxi drivers in Ouagadougou donated a day's earnings. Teachers in Kaya gave part of their salaries. Farmers from the Sahel sent sacks of grain marked pour la patrie for the homeland. For some, it was a coin. For others, a goat, a jerry can of fuel, a bag of rice. By mid-year, over 100 billion CFA francs had been raised not from foreign donors, but from the people themselves. It wasn't just patriotism. It was a declaration: we will pay for our own defense. Across the country, radios crackled with victory updates. State television broadcast tributes to fallen soldiers. In markets, children wore bracelets in the colors of the flag. On social media, the hashtag number #NowsLessDefendens spread like wildfire through Francophone Africa. And yet, as pride grew, so did criticism. International media warned of authoritarian drift. Human rights groups questioned civilian deaths and detained reporters. The West framed it as overreach. But inside the country, people saw it differently. They asked, where were these voices when our villages burned? In Yamba and Arbinda, survival mattered more than press conferences in Geneva. A widow from Jibo was once asked whether she feared her government's growing power. She answered quietly, "I fear the day the drones stop flying." Her words became legend, pain sharpened into truth. Meanwhile, far from the battlefields in Paris, Montreal, and Abidjan, Burkina expatriates gathered. They raised funds, marched with flags, streamed Traoré's speeches on cafe televisions. They said he reminded them of leaders from history books, men who spoke of freedom without asking for permission. But belief always comes at a price. Each victory meant another funeral. Each drone strike, another mother waiting by an empty doorway. One funeral, in particular, broke the nation's heart. Late November 2025, a young captain, one of the first to command the new drones, was laid to rest. His mother stood by the grave, dressed in white. When asked what her son had died for, she said, "So that one day no mother will bury her son for fear." Then she raised her hand, the salute of a soldier's mother. The crowd followed. That image silenced even the critics. Because in that single gesture, a nation's pain became its power. By December, the transformation was complete. The rhythm of life had changed. Once measured by market days and harvests, it now pulsed to the beat of supply convoys and radio reports from the front. Burkina Faso had turned itself into a living war machine. Roads once filled with traders now thundered with armored trucks. Village schools stored ammunition beside textbooks. Airstrips that once welcomed dust now glimmered under the lights of refueling drones. Every drop of fuel, every grain of rice, every liter of water found purpose in one direction: survival. Nearly 28% of the national budget went to defense, the highest in its history. Hospitals postponed surgeries. Teachers left classrooms to manage logistics. Villages relocated to safer zones. And yet, through this exhaustion, unity hardened. Mechanics repaired army trucks for free. Market women pooled coins to send soap and food to soldiers. University students analyzed drone footage. It wasn't charity. It was survival by solidarity. Behind every successful airstrike was an invisible chain: the welder, the driver, the farmer, the mother. None of them wore medals, but without them, no victory would stand. Still, the burden was heavy. Food prices rose. Medicine ran short. Humanitarian agencies warned of famine, but the message from Ouagadougou was resolute. There can be no schools, no markets, no peace without security first. Critics called it reckless. The people called it reality. In August 2025, the government dissolved the Independent Electoral Commission, effectively delaying elections. Western capitals condemned the decision. But when Traoré was asked why, his answer was as blunt as the desert wind. You do not hold a vote in a burning house. And for many, that was enough. They had known decades of corruption, of leaders who ruled from marble halls while soldiers bled in dust. Traoré was different. He ate from the same tin plates, walked in the same mud. Step by step, the state was being rebuilt from the ground up. Command centers shifted closer to conflict zones. Underground depots stored supplies safe from sabotage. Telecom networks began migrating to domestic control. Burkina Faso was learning what independence really costs and how to pay it. But with every triumph came a whisper of danger. When war becomes identity, peace becomes a stranger. Would Burkina Faso ever go back? Would it even want to? By year's end, the silence from Washington and Paris was deafening. In think tanks and embassies, analysts spoke softly about the Sahel problem, but none said aloud what everyone feared. A small African nation was succeeding where the great powers had failed. For Americans, the comparison was uncomfortable. Trillions spent in Iraq and Afghanistan, thousands of lives lost, and yet here was Burkina Faso, armed with resolve and drones, doing more with less. No private contractors, no foreign commanders, just Burkinabe hands on the controls. It was a story that should have inspired, but instead, it embarrassed, because it asked a question few wanted to face. What if belief matters more than budget? In Ouagadougou, the strategy was simple: discipline, unity, ownership. A soldier fights harder for land that belongs to him than for a paycheck from someone else's government. Across Europe, the old powers watched nervously. They were being replaced not by Russia, not by China, but by Africans themselves. That truth alone threatened decades of dependency. And beneath geopolitics lay something deeper: a moral mirror. Freedom cannot be gifted. It must be earned. And if necessary, bled for. Burkina Faso was proving that. As 2025 drew to a close, the transformation reached its peak. The alliance of Sahel states, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger stood together, defying sanctions and skepticism. Their commanders met not in foreign embassies, but in desert bunkers, under the same blazing sun. They shared intelligence, fuel, and airspace. For the first time, Africa's defense was being written by African hands. But unity carries its own weight. Sanctions tightened. Diplomatic pressure rose. The question whispered even in Ouagadougou's corridors: can this alliance survive peace as well as war? Still, the movement felt unstoppable. Across the Sahel, murals of Ibrahim Traoré bloomed on city walls, not as propaganda, but as prayer. His dust-stained face had become a symbol of resistance, a reminder that sovereignty is not requested, it is seized. The future of the Sahel now stands on a knife's edge. If these nations endure, they could redefine independence for a new century, an African century. If they fail, their fall will echo across borders. As one soldier near Jibo said, staring into the horizon, "We are not fighting for the world to believe in us. We fight so that we can believe in ourselves." The night that once belonged to fear now hums with determination. The same drones that once sounded like omens now whisper of rebirth. 3 pillars hold the line: technology, unity, leadership. These are the engines of resurrection. Technology gave them sight. Unity gave them strength. Leadership gave them direction. And together, they forged what history rarely witnesses: a nation reborn in the fire of its own belief. Ibrahim Traoré stands at the center, not as a perfect man, but as a present one. He walks among soldiers, eats their rations, breathes their dust. He reminds them that sovereignty is not granted, it is defended. But even heroes carry shadows. Every drone strike blurs the line between protector and tyrant. Every postponed election risks turning loyalty into fear. And yet, for now, the people stand with him, not because he promises comfort, but because he promises endurance. The world may not say it out loud, but it is watching. From Washington to Paris, from London to Accra, policymakers whisper what they cannot publish. The global order is shifting quietly from the bottom up. What happens in Ouagadougou may one day shape the halls of power elsewhere. What begins in the sand could redefine how nations measure freedom. So I ask you, my friends, will this be Africa's first true victory of the century? Or its last illusion? The answer isn't written yet. It depends on those who dare to look, to listen, and to remember. Because every war, in the end, is more than the clash of armies. It is a battle for memory over who gets to tell the story. Don't look away. Share it. Speak it. Because silence has always been the oldest weapon of all.